Missiles are incoming right now. The US and NATO are preparing a devastating strike. Putin is furious. Shock! She has supported the Kremlin's terror. World War I-II is getting closer. Trump is dragging things out. Tomahawk deliveries, threats to Putin, and Atacms deep into Russia. The end of the Kremlin is near. Patriots are flying. Sanctions are choking. Putin is losing everything. A one-way ticket for all Russians. The drone war has already begun. Ukraine is winning. Hysteria on Russian television. Trump is destroying Putin. Propagandists are in agony. All this and more coming up in our episode of Hotspot. Jokes aside, missiles are aimed at Moscow and St. Petersburg. Trump has made up his mind. Germany is in the game. NATO and the US are pumping Ukraine with weapons. It's the end of the line for the bloody regime. Putin can't escape. Tomahawks, Atacms, long-range strikes on Russia. The US and NATO can't be stopped. There will be no money. Sanctions are tearing the Kremlin apart. Putin's allies have holes in their pockets. Stay tuned for the hot details in the following report. Trump realized that convincing Putin to end the war wouldn't work. Threats came into play. It has become known that the US president considered sending Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine, which are fully capable of striking Moscow and St. Petersburg.
Ukraine will be able to get its hands on a truly massive amount of military equipment, both for air defense and missiles, ammunition, and so on and so forth.
Trump's determination to put pressure on Putin became evident during his conversation with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky last week, right before Trump announced that the US and NATO had reached an agreement to supply weapons to Ukraine. Trump asked Zelensky why he hadn't struck Moscow. "We can, if you give us the weapons," Zelensky replied. Trump stated that Ukraine needs to increase the pressure on Putin, not just on Moscow, but also on St. Petersburg.
God willing, these words won't just be words. And if these words are followed by action, if we actually receive the missiles and those missiles are put into service with us, then we'll be able to precisely destroy factories, plants, facilities, airfields, bases, ammunition depots, weapons, parking areas, and the locations of their brigades and equipment. We will be able to carry out precision strikes, destroying the enemy's forces and assets. Believe me, we will achieve this victory much faster, more effectively, with higher quality, and with absolute minimum losses among the personnel of the Ukrainian armed forces.
Meanwhile, there is information that German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius has announced that his country wants to purchase Typhoon mobile ground launchers from the US, which are designed for those very Tomahawk missiles.
The Bundeswehr currently does not have weapons with a range of 2,000 kilometers. The corresponding European systems are still under development. The Typhoon missile launchers are to be acquired for the transitional period.
These are excellent missiles. They've been in service since the 1980s with the United States and the US Armed Forces. These are very powerful missiles that surpass almost all the missiles currently in service with the Russian Federation and the Russian air defense systems. They are not ready to shoot down these missiles as of today. They can't even shoot down our, let's say, Ukrainian-made drones. Our drones reach Moscow, hit facilities in Moscow, and strike oil depots. But believe me, when it comes to shooting down American missiles, Russia will have almost no chance at all.
The story goes that the purchase of the missile system is aimed at deterring Russia. The Tomahawk is one of the most well-known and effective cruise missiles in the world, developed in the United States. It has been actively used in many conflicts in Iraq, Syria, Libya, and the Balkans.
If you and I were to precisely target a specific facility, the maximum margin of error for a modern ballistic missile hitting its intended point, its designated target, is remarkably small, measuring just 2 meters to the left or to the right of the precise impact zone. These are excellent missiles.
Trump admitted that Putin will not make concessions without increased pressure. But at the same time, he understands that he has embarked on a path of escalation, the risks of which are unpredictable. Tomahawks are not yet included in the list of supplies. They may be deployed later if Trump wants to use them as leverage when he decides to increase pressure on Putin.
If we are supplied with these missiles, Putin will think twice and realize that no one is going to joke around with him anymore.
A source from the Pentagon also told the publication that the US will most likely lift the range restrictions on the Atacms missiles that Ukraine already possesses. This step will allow the Ukrainian military to use the 18 Atacms missiles they have at their full range, which is up to 300 kilometers. That is enough to strike Russian military bases and airfields. Pentagon officials have repeatedly called for deeper strikes on Russian territory using Atacms. The Russians are trying to hide aircraft and other equipment in the rear, beyond the reach of Ukrainian forces. Well, now that would be more difficult. Putin soiled himself out of fear. The legendary Tomahawk missiles are in Ukraine. China is stepping in for the Kremlin. Putin rejected Trump's ultimatum. Military escalation is underway. Shock! The zombie army is bombing with chemical weapons. Explosive details watch right now.
They are capable of striking targets deep in the Russian rear. The United States may provide Ukraine with Tomahawk cruise missiles. The delivery of Tomahawks was discussed as early as Friday, the 11th of July, but these missiles were not included in the final list of weapons for Ukraine. Nevertheless, Tomahawks may be provided to Kyiv later if Trump decides to increase pressure on Russia.
Tomahawks fly at extremely low altitudes, taking the terrain into account, which effectively puts them out of reach of the Russian air defense system. The possibility of transferring Tomahawk missiles to the Ukrainian side would significantly strengthen Ukraine's position when striking legitimate military targets on the territory of the Russian Federation, especially considering the tactical and technical characteristics of this warhead and accordingly its range. The Ukrainian side can therefore count on the supply of both air-launched and land-based Tomahawk missiles.
Trump himself allegedly called for strikes on Moscow. At least that's what the American media reported. But then the White House denied this information, stating that the president's words had been taken out of context. However, what is reliable information from the mouth of the US president is that the first Patriot missiles are already being shipped to allies, which means that Ukraine will receive them soon.
They are actually coming from Germany.
They are coming from Germany, and then Germany replaces them. And in all cases, the United States receives full payment.
Earlier, Trump threatened to impose 100% tariffs on goods from Russia if Putin does not reach a ceasefire agreement within 50 days. But the Russian dictator is not intimidated by the prospect of tougher American sanctions, and he is determined to continue the war until the West agrees to his terms for a settlement, Reuters reports, citing Kremlin sources.
These are political statements from the Russian leadership, but the practical reality shows the opposite. This is the visit of Foreign Minister Lavrov to the People's Republic of China at a time when there is a need to diversify supplies and goods, and accordingly to seek economic assistance from the People's Republic of China in light of the possible consequences of American sanctions. This points to a profound economic crisis in the Russian Federation.
And of course, China is more than happy to help the Russian dictator. After meeting with the Russian foreign minister, Xi Jinping stated that Beijing and Moscow should strengthen their mutual support and added that both countries are creating a model of a new type of international relations.
This is in fact a direct confrontation between China and the United States. Moreover, in this conflict, Russia has been assigned the role of a vassal to the People's Republic of China.
With or without China's help, Putin's troops continue to violate all the rules of war. The aggressor country is increasingly using chemical weapons in Ukraine, stated the European Union's chief diplomat Kaja Kallas. According to her, since the start of the full-scale invasion, the occupiers have used chemical weapons at least 9,000 times.
There have been multiple documented instances of the Russian occupation army using chemical weapons. This is despite the fact that the occupying country has signed and ratified international treaties on the elimination of chemical weapons and accordingly the means of their production.
According to Deep State, Russian forces have managed to advance near 3 settlements in the Donetsk region and 1 more in the Kharkiv region.
There have been certain tactical successes, but specifically in the Upolovsk direction, it is no coincidence that the Russian occupiers are trying to intensify combat operations precisely in this direction. Their strategic goal is to attempt to reach the administrative borders of the Dnipropetrovsk region so that they can later use this situation as an element of military and political pressure. In the Kharkiv region, there is an expansion of the zone of presence directly in the border areas. This is the implementation of the Russian dictator's plan to create a so-called buffer zone.
Meanwhile, Russia continues to churn out fakes. Russian propagandists claim that an alleged Ukrainian FPV drone attacked civilian women near a house in the Sumy region. The women, it is claimed, were holding a sign that said they were Russian and were asking for help. However, this information is not supported by any credible evidence. The quality of the video does not allow the text on the sign to be read. It is impossible to determine who the drones belong to.
A death tranche for Russia. Ukraine is receiving everything it needs to strike Moscow and beyond. The US provides weapons, NATO pays. A new plan to defeat the Kremlin has been launched. Trump put on a show. Threats, weapons, and sanctions are hitting the very heart of the Kremlin. Putin is shocked by the ultimatum. This is the final core for the bunker dweller.
10 billion for arming Ukraine. 17 Patriots, ammunition, missiles, and even calls to bomb Moscow. All of this is no longer just a dream, but reality. The US is officially back on the side of good.
I hung up the phone with President Putin saying it was just a routine and ordinary conversation, and then suddenly missiles fly directly toward Kyiv. Clearly talks don't really matter at all.
The rhetoric is surprising, but there's a catch. The US isn't giving Ukraine weapons for free, it's selling them. And it's not Kyiv that's paying. Here's how it works. NATO members buy the weapons from the United States and then they transfer them to Ukraine.
Donald Trump, there's this problem, he doesn't actually propose any solutions himself. He just jumps on board with successful options, and a successful option emerged, which was discussed at the Alliance Summit, where on the one hand the Alliance agreed to Trump's demand to increase defense spending to 5%, and that's important. But this 5% must necessarily include aid to Ukraine. This way, the countries that are helping us don't have to stretch themselves thin, looking for ways to both meet the alliance's requirements and provide assistance
to Ukraine to repel Russian aggression.
So everyone wins, the US profits, Ukraine gets the necessary weapons, and Europe isn't stretched too thin. Germany immediately welcomed Trump's initiative. German Chancellor Merkel stated that she had discussed the purchase of American weapons by Europeans with the American president several times, and added that Germany would play a decisive role.
We are doing this in our own interests. This will help Ukraine defend itself against Russian bombing terror. This is the only way to increase pressure on Moscow in order to finally reach a peace agreement. Ultimately, we are showing that we are moving in the same direction as our security partners.
Security for Ukraine is priority number one, and security means air defense systems. Kyiv has repeatedly requested additional Patriots, and in this regard, Trump was truly surprising, as he promised to deliver far more than just 1 or 2 systems.
In fact, this agreement is about both ammunition and missiles. We have 17 Patriots being prepared for shipment. A huge number of these 17 will be sent to the battlefield. This can be done quickly.
However, there are some nuances to this as well. Trump promises them in the near future, while German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius states that the delivery of the first system could take several months. At the same time, Trump himself said that several countries that have Patriots are planning to exchange them. In other words, they will transfer them to Ukraine and the US will replace them. There are also plans to supply Kyiv with short-range missiles, howitzer shells, and medium-range air-to-air missiles. But for now, everything is vague. No one knows the exact list except for the Patriots. And most importantly, it is unknown when the deliveries will begin.
Indeed, for now there is a lot of uncertainty, a lot of questions. But I would like this process to start as soon as possible. And basically, it's also in Trump's own interest to start actively selling weapons to Europe and supplying them to Ukraine, because that way America will make money as well. He will be able to report to his voters that he has achieved from Europe, that they are buying much more American weaponry and so on and so forth. Moreover, it is already clear to everyone that in order to get concessions from Putin, you have to put strong pressure on him. Any kind of concession that he perceives as a sign of weakness, and in direct response, he immediately starts to be rude and act quite cocky.
Trump also intends to put financial pressure on Putin. The American president has issued an ultimatum to Putin, either a 50-day ceasefire or the US authorities will impose 100% tariffs on Russian goods, as well as secondary sanctions against countries that buy oil from Russia. But Trump has already been criticized for this in the European Union, not for being too tough, but for being too slow. The head of European diplomacy, Kaja Kallas, believes that a 50-day deadline is too long.
On the one hand, it is very positive that President Trump is taking a firm stance toward Russia. On the other hand, 50 days is a very long time when we see that they are killing innocent civilians.
There is also the question of whether such a fickle Trump might change sides again. But for now, the only effect on the Russians is that the American president is just making them angry. After all, it was Medvedev who has long been irritated by the American president, who was the first to respond to Trump's initiative. On top of that, he poured more fuel on the fire by claiming that Trump had supposedly issued a theatrical ultimatum to the Kremlin.
The world held its breath, waiting for the consequences. Militant Europe was disappointed, Russia was indifferent.
Whether this is really the case, we will find out very soon, and we sincerely hope that Trump has stopped playing games and now truly understands all the threats.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
That's it. The US and China are on the warpath. The world is on the brink. The countdown has begun. Trump is acting decisively. Weapons are flowing into Ukraine. The bunker dweller is screaming. China is taking the Kremlin under its wing. America will not back down. Will Putin really get away with it again? Spoiler: no! Watch for all the details coming up.
It truly seems that Donald Trump genuinely thought that Vladimir Putin truly wanted peace, despite, of course, the aggressive and undeniable actions of the Kremlin dictator, which clearly show the complete opposite.
After a period of 50 days, if a comprehensive agreement is not successfully reached, well, that particular outcome will indeed be very bad for all involved. Yes, tariffs will be imposed, and other sanctions will follow.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump reports that the deadline given to Russia to make peace could potentially end even sooner than expected.
Oh, I don't think 50 days is a long time, and maybe even sooner. I don't think 50 days is a long time.
Trump's promise to impose 100% tariffs on buyers of Russian oil and his 5-day ultimatum demanding an end to the war did not have the expected effect on the Kremlin. But who would have doubted that?
There have been 24-hour deadlines before and 100 days as well. We've been through all this, and we really want to understand what motivates the President of the United States. It is clear that he is under enormous, I would even say indecent, pressure from the European Union and the current NATO leadership, who are brazenly supporting Zelensky's demands to keep supplying him with modern, including offensive weapons.
According to Reuters, a new escalation on the battlefield by the Russian Federation is possible in the coming months. In this way, Putin will show that he has rejected Trump's ultimatum.
In my opinion, such a scenario is absolutely impossible. Because this is not just about relationships. Here we are discussing Trump and Putin, and they have quite an entertaining little threesome going on. Of course, I mean, electrical appliances, not what some others might have thought. And in this scheme, the weak link is, of course, Putin, because he is now completely dependent on both China and America. And in reality, China and America want the same thing. They don't want the war to end, but they do want its intensity to decrease.
Meanwhile, China has also hesitated. She has announced increased support for Russia in the face of Trump's threats. It is noted that China and Russia are together creating a new model of international relations.
In reality, China is simply reclaiming its possessions. They are directly controlling Putin and his gang, which for some reason is called the government of the Russian Federation. And here they are just planting their flags and explaining to the whole world that this is our vassal, this is our territory, these are our resources. If you look at how China, for example, is exploiting Russian forests, you will have no doubt whatsoever about what I am saying.
After Trump, according to the media, supposedly urged Zelensky to strike deep into Russia, he then stated that Zelensky should not do this, and also said that he does not plan to provide Ukraine with long-range missiles.
You know whose side I'm on? I'm on the side of humanity. I want the killing of thousands of people every week to stop. I want to stop the killings. I want the killings in the war between Ukraine and Russia to end. That's whose side I'm on.
And nothing changes in Russia. There, they propose to fine you not only for extremism, but even for just searching for something about it on the internet. If you just wanted to read about it, you get fined. And if you dare to advertise a VPN, add another punishment on top of that.
The thing is, they're just in a panic, terrified that once the wheel of popular protest starts turning over there, because what they're doing now is just completely outrageous, beyond any limits. They understand that support for Putin, support for the war is rapidly approaching zero over there. Unfortunately, it's a pity that at the same time, the number of people there who are ready to take decisive action is also close to zero. All those who were ready for this are either in prison, have been killed, or are abroad.
But that's not all. The State Duma has now come up with the idea of stripping Russian citizenship for articles related to murder, rape, and organizing illegal migration. And of course, any other crime if it was committed with an extremist motive.
Yes, this is a method of state control, because revoking citizenship is a convenient way, for example, to remove a Russian opposition figure from any kind of legitimate sphere. This once again shows that somewhere deep within that very monster called the Kremlin, there is now an understanding that everything is going downhill, that anger will continue to grow.
By the 23rd of July, the State Duma plans to finally pass a law that expands the list of grounds for revoking acquired citizenship. Previously, there were 64 articles of the Criminal Code. Now there are already 72. At this rate, soon it will be easier not to keep your citizenship, but to choose something more comfortable in advance.
The uprising of the machines is a reality. The front line has been frozen by UAVs. Advancement is impossible. FPV drones hit hard. Russian heavy equipment is being destroyed. Nightmare of the night. The vampire drone is terrorizing the occupiers. The iron birds can't be stopped. Ukraine is one step ahead. More details coming up.
The front line in Ukraine is moving forward less and less. Not because there aren't enough munitions, but because a new era has begun, the era of drones. According to the Wall Street Journal, citing Ukrainian sources, drones dominate the front line. They make movement impossible. Every step is under surveillance. Every movement could be your last. Now, drones are not just for reconnaissance, they are the eyes, hands, and weapons of war. They lay mines, drop grenades, deliver ammunition and medical supplies, and sometimes even evacuate the wounded and the dead. And most importantly, they track every movement and strike precisely where a target appears. From the very first days of the full-scale war, it was Ukraine that bet on these iron birds.
This is a Ukrainian know-how, the tactic known as the drone wall. The Ukrainian side, fully aware of the Russian army's superiority in firepower, meaning tube and rocket artillery, and therefore in the ratio of firepower as well as ammunition reserves, and was forced to change its tactics of warfare, taking into account the realities directly on the battlefield.
At first, Ukrainian defenders used drones for aerial photography. Back then, they served the reconnaissance function, recording enemy movements onto a flash drive. Then analysts would review these videos. But everything changed when the footage started being transmitted in real time. From that moment, the artillery began hitting targets with precision. Quickly, more precisely, instantly.
The tech specialists realized that a simple device, resembling a claw and created with a 3D printer, could be activated from the control panel by turning on the drone's light, which would make it release a grenade. The explosion can injure or kill a soldier, and if dropped through a hatch, it can also destroy armored vehicles.
But what truly changed the game was another invention: attack drones with a first-person view, the so-called FPV drones. They give the operator a full sense of presence, as if they are flying themselves. Yes, they are less powerful than missiles, but they win in terms of accuracy and, most importantly, cost. They can be mass-produced domestically.
What the Ukrainian side has proposed is an innovative tactic: the mass use of FPV drones to destroy both heavy armored vehicles and enemy personnel. In other words, all heavy armored vehicles are effectively destroyed within the range of FPV drones. Moreover, by using repeaters, Ukraine's defense forces have increased the effective range of FPV drones in certain areas of the front from 20 to even 30 kilometers.
The enemy is trying not to fall behind the Ukrainians, and although most innovations were created by Ukrainian engineers and military personnel, in one area Russian developers turned out to be faster. They began equipping FPV drones with fiber optic cables that connect the device directly to the operator. This makes it possible to bypass electronic interference and jammers.
After drone strikes by the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine on the plant in Saransk, which is the only facility in Russia producing fiber optic cables for FPV drones, this situation was neutralized at the very moment when Russian activity in using fiber optic FPV drones was declining. At the moment, Ukraine's defense forces and Ukroboronprom are scaling up the production of Ukrainian-made FPV drones using fiber optic. Moreover, the occupiers have noted a sharp increase in their numbers.
Ukraine's response was the Vampire drone. It operates at night, when most drones are rendered blind. The Vampire makes it possible to drop heavier charges in places where a lightweight copter can't reach. It flies silently, strikes from the darkness, and leaves behind only smoke and debris. The research doesn't stop there. Manufacturers continue to experiment with unmanned ground vehicles, boats, and all-terrain vehicles. They operate in areas where humans can no longer survive, where the fields are mined and the sky is filled with enemy FPVs. This is no longer just equipment, it's vital infrastructure. That's precisely why the front line is no longer advancing. People simply can't keep up with the machines. Every step out of the trench could be a one-way ticket. War is no longer linear. Today it's targeted, instantaneous, mechanized. And now the winner isn't just the strongest, but the one who thinks, types, and flies the fastest. The war of the future has already begun, and Ukraine is leading it. They're bashing Trump on the zombie box. Oh, what happened? What are Solovyov, Skabeva, and the rest of the bloody dictator's minions unhappy about? Rostov is foaming at the mouth with rage. War is peace, and potato prices are a terrible Western conspiracy. The propaganda is coming apart at the seams. Trump is destroying the Kremlin's rhetoric.
In the world of Russian propaganda, time seems to have frozen somewhere between 1943 and surrealism. Here, war is peace, destroyed cities are someone's malice, and expensive potatoes are the result of a conspiracy by external enemies. The thing is, in Russia, potato prices have soared so high that this ordinary vegetable has turned into a real delicacy. Ordinary Russians have started to buy the second bread, as potatoes were called in Soviet times, less often.
Potatoes, it's just a catastrophe. I already can't afford to buy cabbage for myself unless it's really necessary. And now potato S, it's a real problem.
Have you noticed the rise in food prices?
Very much so.
So what should we do? The answer is already traditional.
What is it connected to? How should I know? Because of the war. Basically, because of the war. Everything is going there. All the money is going to the war.
What should be done about this? How can the situation be fixed?
Zelensky needs to be removed. Everything will be fixed.
Well, as always, the atmosphere of patriotism is on the verge of boiling over. This time a fresh incident has occurred. The wife of a so-called Azov soldier got into a verbal spat with a veteran, but not of this war.
My husband will come back. I'm waiting for him. We are grateful to you for having fought there. But why are you insulting my husband today?
I'm not insulting him. I'll say it again.
Before him, nothing.
What's he doing there? What he doing?
I don't need this. What do you mean, what? He's defending the motherland, got it?
Residents of temporarily occupied Mariupol are once again outraged. Those who lost their homes have encountered a new paradox. New mortgage housing is being built where the destroyed residential neighborhoods once stood. But no one is offering these new apartments to the former owners.
Where our homes used to be, there are now pits and broken promises. Not only were we not given new housing, but now they're planning to build mortgage apartments on the site of our destroyed homes. At a meeting with the residents of our two buildings, DNR Deputy Shishkina Elena said directly at the administration that mortgage housing would indeed be built on the site of our demolished building, and that up to 10% of the apartments from this building would be allocated to our city.
The occupiers also had some advice for Mariupol residents on how to go on living.
When asked why these apartments couldn't be given to the residences, there aren't that many families left, the answer was not well received. Quoting, "These apartments are not for you, and in general, it's Ukraine that should be restoring the city and compensating you for your housing, not Russia."
And in today's reality, a new explanation has emerged for why Ukrainian cities lie in ruins. It turns out it's not the evil Russians who are to blame, but the Ukrainians themselves. According to some people's logic, the residents are deliberately leaving only damaged houses and destroyed streets for the Russians. They just don't want, you see, for the occupiers to come in and live comfortably in their homes.
This is the image of a humanitarian catastrophe that will be broadcast to the West. And in fact, their goal, as I understand it, is for all the cities that unfortunately we captured to be left to us in such a deplorable state that, well, take Bakhmut, for example. I exploded thoroughly, or Krasnohorivka, Avdiivka, you just want to throw up your hands in despair, right? They calmly, with a sense of mission accomplished, the IFU withdraws from the cities. That's it. They left us a ruined, broken city.
Recently in Russia, Donald Trump's latest statements have truly shattered established patterns. On the federal channels popularly nicknamed Goebbels television, the US president is no longer considered their elephant, especially after his remarks about Putin.
And today Trump, with a dismissive tone, says, "I'm not satisfied with Putin." Not satisfied. He says, "I'm not satisfied with Putin." Why is that? Before our eyes, Trump is undergoing Bidenization. Trump, from being the only one who could talk to Putin, is turning into just another version of Biden. And does he really think, in all seriousness, that he can now condescendingly tell us what to do and we'll just obey?
Archpriest Kachev stated that modern women have stopped thinking about demographics and do not want to have children. According to him, women should be encouraged to have children and men should be protected since they are more valuable.
We've reached a time when women won't give birth to anyone anymore. They've become weak, cowardly, promiscuous, and don't want to have children. We are disappearing, our numbers are shrinking, so we need to preserve our people. In other words, there is such a practice as preserving the nation, that is, we need to protect our people.
However, in reality, many men themselves willingly go to be disposed of, signing contracts to go to the front for 200,000 rubles. It seems that in this country, it's not so much the men who need to be protected, but rather what's left of common sense.
That's all for now, and for more breaking news from the front, tune in to our next episode.